All right, welcome to the Wicked Pissah podcast. I'm Chris Boyd, the show host. Thanks for being with us. I'm joined today by Mike Byrnes of Byrnes Consulting, and we're talking about marketing. It's as we're running into the end of the year. I don't know about you, Mike, but I'm sure thinking about next year to try to get off to a good start. And so I thought this would be certainly a topic that we've touched on this, the same kind of thing last year, talk about business planning and so forth. But I thought let's talk specifically about marketing, because I think marketing in the age of COVID is challenging, and it causes people to sort of reassess how should they be thinking about things. So let me just start off, Mike. People in this, listeners of the show, our podcast, have been introduced to you before. But if they hadn't heard your previous segments with us, let's introduce you again. Tell us a little about yourself and your practice.
Sure. Started the business in 2008. Byrnes Consulting really helps advisors grow. We're part of the FPA Coaches Corner of all those disciplines. They have cybersecurity and compliance and all that. We have business growth strategies, so we're really excited because that's our sweet spot. And been a good friend of the FPAs for a long time, whether it's our local chapter on a national level and speak throughout the country. So this year, I think we did 6 webinars with the FPA, and hopefully we'll do even more next year. Maybe back to those in-person events too. Hopefully that's the case. Yeah,
with any luck, right? Yeah, as we have this hope of vaccines starting to talk about being disseminated and so forth. So, although, that's really the question too, as it relates to how quickly will this give us the opportunity for life to resume. And I think that does complicate our marketing thinking as well when we address this, because it's very possible that we'll be, in between for a while, where we'll still be in this sort of COVID mode with virtual meetings and the like. Before we get to that, but maybe by the end of the year or halfway through the year, we might, be able to revisit in-person meetings or events, seminars, I don't know what. So where should we begin in talking about planning? Should we look back or look ahead, or, are there lessons we should drive from 2020 as we look toward planning for 2021?
Yeah, well, I'll say, like, even my business got impacted because I don't have the in-person speaking engagements, but my consulting business blew up because all the things I was already talking about as best practices now are must-haves. Like you have to be in the virtual world, and so it's been a nice. The pandemic's not good in any way. I'm sorry for anyone that's been impacted, directly or indirectly, but on kind of the benefits for me is that there's a lot of advisors or financial planners that realized that they needed help. One little simple thing I would say is, if you don't have a great digital presence, your website's not an A+, has to be, it really should be, should be, I guess you could debate that. If you don't have virtual event strategies, webinars and other things, online discussions like this, if you're not pushing out all kinds of great video content and text and graphs and infographics, and if you don't have just this wonderful content strategy, and if you're not ramping it up, being probably twice to 4 or 8 times as active as you were last year, you're missing the boat. And it's, unfortunately, this isn't going to stop just like that. I know, we talked about maybe the vaccine will come through and people will start to come out of the woodwork, but I don't think everyone's going to come back to this real world. Like, I think some of this stuff is the new normal. So you shouldn't be looking in the rearview mirror of saying, hey, that worked, and I'm going to go right back to that. It's going to be a mix. Some people are going to prefer conversations like this over, I think introverted people especially, but there'll definitely be some people that aren't going to be part of that old world. So how are you going to pivot and be more successful in that world?
Let me ask you a little bit about some of that for a minute. So one, you said 2 to 8 times the level of activity. And by that, you're talking about video posting and social media engagement, I think, relative to what you might have been doing before. That sounds like a lot. Is there a point at which you can do too much?
Yes, and for some people, it was 2 to 8 times 0. So
Yeah, right.
they have to be in this world, whether they like it or not. But for others,
Yeah,
yes. The best thing about digital marketing is, I always say this, it's very trackable. So there's a lot of great analytical tools. So if you're using a tool like Constant Contact for your email, you know what your open rates are and what your click-through rates are. So you can measure if you're going overboard and not getting in front of them. Some of the things, video strategies, for example, there's a lot of wonderful content out there that financial advisors go, yeah, we need to push that out there, but they don't know if there's an audience. Like, they don't test and do that extra work up front. I get, we're a client referrals driven industry, and event marketing was wonderful, right? But you can't actually get introduced in person like you used to be able to. So your videos now can play that role, and they always could before, but I'll just take a quick step back. I used to say there's 3 easy ways to get client referrals, or 3 types of ways. 1 is to wow them and they just happen. 2 is to create opportunities to get introduced. And 3rd is to create content that would be shared. And that's where a lot of financial planners would suffer, because they create some content, but they don't necessarily know that there's a built-in audience to have it shared. So if you want, I can talk about kind of what to do before you create a video.
sure. Yeah, go ahead with that.
All right. So one of the things we see is, again, the advisor will come up with a head and they can run with it. And then, they put a lot of time into the production, sharing, and then they get, relatively 0 views, and it wasn't viral at all.
Yeah.
My definition of viral is, you get it in front of 5 good prospects. It doesn't have to be, you have 1 billion views, but as long as you're potentially getting leads. And so what I recommend for them to do is go sit across from their target market. So one of their clients that really fits who they want to bring in as new clients, and say, hey, was this helpful that I did X, Y, and Z for you? I was thinking about, creating a video for people like you. Do you know anyone that could benefit from that? Yes. Well, if I create that video, any advice of some things I should put in there? Obviously, keep it confidential. Don't give away anything specific about your client. So now they've actually kind of contributed some ideas to the video.
They're engaged a little bit, maybe invested in the process and the success.
Yeah, like they feel like it's their video, and they feel like you're creating it for those people that they mentioned. Like, oh yeah, some people that are, widows, for example, like going through something really bad, they're about to lose a significant other, or they did. Like, oh, you know what? I'll create a video for them so you can share it with them. Yeah. And bam, you have a built-in distribution channel for your video before you ever create it. And that's how you do well in the viral marketing world. Is don't just put it up there and hope that it gets that traction, which you still could, but it's nice to have that sharing mechanism, so it's going to get the eyeballs that you need on it.
One of the things that makes me wonder about this new reality. So when we would do seminars in the past, we had a pretty clear sense of what our conversion rate would be, or however you want to refer to that. But, how much business we'd end up actually getting out of that experience, that event. How many people in those seats would lead to what level of transactions, if you will. I think conversion becomes more of a challenge when it comes to, okay, we can put out content, we can, put all this stuff out there. But to your point, how do we know, one, that, like, how do we make sure that it's being seen and distributed, disseminated in a way that's in front of enough people? And all those metrics are probably very different for how many eyeballs need to see it before we lead to some kind of a resulting action. And whether or not, I don't know, like, what the metrics of how many people I need to see before it leads to an actual business opportunity. You know what I mean? Can you just speak to that notion a little bit?
Sure.
How do you got to envision some of these things, and how much to put out, and how do we make sure that it's being seen sufficiently? Do I got to pay for boosts and stuff like that, or and then is it a totally different metric for how many occasions and levels of interest it takes before I turn that into an actual client experience?
Wonderful. So I will say conversion is a little harder online. If you're sitting, I think most planners would say, if you're sitting across from somebody, across your desk or a boardroom table, you're more likely to close them if you're doing it over the phone. And then virtual is a little bit better if you're doing it via this type of discussion, because they can know you. So you should factor that in. I agree with that. But let's say you had a $5,000 event marketing budget that you didn't have to use at all, or you couldn't use. So now you're doing webinars, which are virtually free. You pay for the software, and you have to do the uploading. So there's some staffing work that has to be done, but there's extra money to be spent. If you're very targeted with digital advertising and you can drive leads in, you can track to make sure you're getting the right leads. And so you creating the content or the webinar for that right audience, and then backtracking what that value would be. One thing I do tell my clients is, sometimes they do the math and the ROI based on whether they bring that client in and what the revenue would be for 1 year. But most planners keep those clients for life. And so what's the lifelong value of a client? And so you can actually tweak the ROI model a little bit more to spend a little bit more if you think you're going to have a client for a long period of time. I can get into more specifics, but I hope that's kind of getting you a sense of how this all should work. And the lead funnel.
So I am hearing you say that you do need to spend money in terms of this to get penetration. It's one thing. I mean, I don't know about you, Mike, but you probably have a ton of followers. But on our social media, we've got a couple hundred on this channel, a couple hundred on that channel, and there probably is overlap in those. And it's largely people we know, already. So it's not a real distribution channel, if you will, and nor is it sufficiently a community that is kind of fostering development and creation of more of its own, like that kind of thing. So we're kind of limited in terms of that reach. So I'm of the mind that we probably need to then, when we have good content, put some money behind it to get it more widely seen, to draw those people in that we don't already have contact with.
Yeah, one of the common faults that I see with advisors is they do brand awareness type of digital advertising, and that can't compete with like a big wirehouse name, for example. So they're never that successful. If you're going to do any type of digital marketing, I really recommend direct response advertising. So you're not just trying to be known, you're actually trying to get them to take some action, whether it's, get your freemium on your website, which is some giveaway that you can catch their contact information, whether they're registering for your webinar, you can get that, or whether you're sending them out a video series or whatever it might be. Then
have that call to action, whether it's I was on Words with Friends a couple of nights ago, and I got 3 different Fisher advertisements for myself on that. And I was like, oh, there's a lesson here. These guys are good, right? In terms of their marketing, they've got I see them on Instagram, I see them on things like this. And so it makes you think a little bit about how do you plan for and every one of them was a call to action. Get your 7 secrets of whatever, or mistakes of whatever, and you get my point.
Yeah.
And it was a call to action. I think that it's time consuming to create those pieces of literature, whatever it is, the get your free, whatever it happens to be, item. But that seems like it can be leveraged so well when it comes to social media, to put that time in front. Do you want to touch on that? Is that something that's an essential part of the process? And that kind of takes time with graphics and, to be professionally done with the right look or whatever.
I will tell you that the advisors that are creating websites that just have a contact us form, and that's the only way they can capture a lead, their websites are suffering. Like, they're not really true lead funnels, because a lot of prospects can come to your website and see a lot of stuff they like, but they're not going to take that next step because they have to proactively go fill out the contact us page. But if you have some teaser on there that they have to have, like, oh my goodness, that is talking exactly what it like to me as a target market.
Yeah.
And it's teasing me, like, you make it sensational. Like, some of the Fisher stuff you can learn from, like, mistakes to avoid.
Right.
create some urgency. Like, I'm about to retire, and this is a 5 things mistakes to avoid when you retire. I better get
Right.
that.
That's exactly the kind of stuff it was. And yeah, so okay, but that takes time to create that stuff in advance.
How much time are you saving from not traveling? How much dollars are you saving from not traveling? And there's time. I think, yes.
Well, I think it also forces you to define your target market a little bit too, because you're really identifying those challenges that your market, your target really faces, and that can really set you up beneficially as well, right?
Right, and you've heard me talk about target markets, how important they are, and segmenting your strategy. But you can have some generic things like the Fisher thing. I don't know if it was Fisher, but 5 things you have to avoid, mistakes you have to avoid before you retire, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Talks to a lot like pre-retirees or retirees. Those are gigantic groups, but those freemiums or giveaways on your website that tease people to trade their contact information should be really targeted. And most people think, oh, if I'm going to do one, I'll just put it on my homepage, and then maybe it'll be on the sidebar of every sub-page or drill down page. But that's where marketing can be that much more advanced. You can create something that can go on a drill down page that's specific to that page. So if it's speaking to widows or corporate executives, have it be the giveaway specific to them.
Well, and should that PDF or whatever, should there be a gate to, you have to provide your contact information in order to, you can see that it's right behind that screen. I just need to get my email address or whatever it might be. Isn't that really important at this stage for that kind of engagement, so that you can continue to drip and then, maybe it's now after the 5 secrets for successful retirement, maybe it's the 7 secrets of mistakes to avoid. And, you then try to pull them back in if they didn't come through with an appointment, and maybe a drip campaign that follows these. Am I right?
Yeah. And I'll answer one of your previous questions. Does it take a lot of time to create all this? Like, yeah, if you create an ebook or something like that, or a real book, it's deeper resources, but sometimes it's a 2-page, 2-sided flyer, right? Like two pages. And it's a quick article that just speaks to me and whatever target market I am. And that's just enough to trade their contact information and tease them to want to learn more. That's the secret. We're in this world where none of us want another email. We can't keep up with our emails, right? So what would be so enticing? They'd be like, it's risky. I'm going to get more emails, but it's worth it. I'm going to trade my information.
I want to go back to 2 to 8 times the content, and we're talking largely video content. All right, so we're having a discussion, record a Zoom call, a discussion with advisors or yourself or whatever it might be. All right, so the content's relatively easy to create, but in terms of the technology now, I got my phone, I've got the program, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. Yeah. But how do we think about the content? Do we do a series? Do we think about just one-offs? Hey, what's on my mind today? How compelling does this have to be, or should it be? Like, how grand in its thoughtful scope and design, or is it something where we're trying to build rapport and relationship, and it's partly just about getting the other side of the screen to get to know you and feel comfortable that they're going to reach out to you?
Yeah, so a whole bunch of stuff in there, and years of advice to try to cram into like a couple quick answers.
No, I'm like throwing too much at you.
Well, from a topic standpoint,
I just figure these are the kind of things I think about. I imagine other people are thinking the same thing. Like how much, how do I structure this, that kind of.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of client research. And so now is a perfect time to do it at the end of the year, or at least try to do it once or every other year. And one of the questions can be, what keeps you up at night, or what are your major worries, or what concerns, or what kind of content would you want me to create? So you can get, depending on your client base, you can get enough content to create for the whole year. But that's just the first step. Then the second part of it is now starting to create a strategy to get it out. And we have limited resources, all of us, time and dollars. So what's going to have the most bang for the buck? The good news is There's a couple bad trends, and you have to figure them out and to be successful. But one of the bad trends is we're this ADD society. We get pulled in a whole bunch of different directions.
True.
The upside is that is our content can be short. We just need to know how to jam it. You know, if you're going to create a video, my advice is, okay, whatever you were going to try to do, try to cut it in half and try to front load it so you win them over. Some video techniques is have a hook. So some teaser of content at the end of the video that they should stick around for. One of them,
and earlier on, and that it's coming, kind of thing.
Yeah, and even one simple one's a listicle, which is like I'm going to give you 5 pieces of advice on this topic, and so they want to stick around for all 5. But like, yeah, so, you know, I'm going to give you my best piece of advice at the end of this video, so please make sure you stick around for it. That little technique keeps people from the term is avoiding out of the video, where they and people do. We just, you know, if you think of all the content that's online, and we're a short attention span society, like we have 1,000 things or 1,000,000 things, or actually probably there's over 1 billion websites. They're not all active, but there's all kinds of distractions out there. So you really have to be really good at your content.
How long is appropriate then?
Well, so before I answer that, your other question was like, should you be kind of, you know, really strong in the content? I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
Or should you kind of be relationship based? I'm a big fan of infotainment. I might have said this before, but it's a combination of entertainment and information, and then combine the two, and then, you know, make it kind of fun and exciting to go through the stuff. Don't just be kind of like a boring professor teaching all the time. You can make your true side come across. What was your question? How long should it be?
Yeah.
I get that question all the time. I usually put the question back on my clients, like, who's the audience? But, you know, the simple answer is your clients probably have a longer attention span because they have a relationship with them already. Prospects much shorter, so get to the point as quick as you can. But it really depends on your audience and what you're trying to get across. If you're creating kind of a simple video strategy, you're probably shooting for 90 seconds to 5 minutes and to get things out. I think I probably told you before on some of your great radio show before is in YouTube, there's a tool that allows you to create a playlist. And so you can have a video play, and it can be short. And then it's just like those kind of, I used to joke, like the love mixes you'd make on the cassettes back in the day. It had a theme, right? So
yeah,
your playlist does that. It plays. So someone that has a longer attention span, the next video will play and play and play and play. So you share the playlist link, not the individual YouTube link.
That's good.
That keeps them,
really good.
Keeps them in there. Yeah.
You know, let me backtrack a minute, because I feel like I've been peppering you with all kinds of questions. But, you know, I wonder if we should step back and say, you know, you mentioned that your business is largely about, you know, growth, but, you know, helping people grow their business, and that notion. And so tell us a little bit about your business and, you know, how you help advisors. Is it individual advisors? Is it, you know, large companies, like everything in between? And then, you know, how do you approach the whole thing? Is it specific projects? I want to get better at this. Or is it, hey, let's figure out a comprehensive plan as you're thinking about your marketing plan for 2021. Let's dig in and figure out what that should look like. You know, that kind of mindset. Narrow to specific, anything in between. Tell us a little bit.
So we work with all different sizes. You know, the smaller mom and pop type of firm needs a lot of help, but also the firm with $1 billion plus in AUM has all more complicated issues, and they actually have levels of staff and advisors, and they're all at different levels too. So even the more sophisticated, bigger firms have a lot of issues. So as long as they can pay a retainer really is the factor. And we just charge based on how much we can help folks. You know, our typical engagement does have growth involved, but there's an amazing amount of stuff we learn as we peel back the onion. Like, partners sometimes can't stand each other, so we got to help them communicate better. Sometimes they're inappropriately staffed. Sometimes we're not compliance experts, but we identify all kinds of compliance issues that they have and get them a resource to help them. And so our engagements can go, that's why we do a retainer, because we used to start with a project, and there was so much consulting lingo is scope creep, because the project would be this, but they drift off with all these other questions that we could help them with, and we wanted to help them, but they weren't paying for it because they were in that little project. So now the retainer model just allows us to go wherever we can help them and whatever the
That makes
priority.
sense.